evening to pay tribute and honor to the life of Anthony Tony Griffith and to express our love and admiration for him as we share memories and stories. Let's join together in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we gather this evening to celebrate the life of one of your children who you put on this earth for a purpose. We are so thankful for the love and kindness and good times that we had with Tony for the years that he was with us. We are thankful that you created him and allowed him to touch our lives. We ask for your strength, comfort, and guidance as we learn to navigate this life without him. Thank you for your time this evening to bring us together to celebrate his life. As he cruises the golden highways of heaven, we hope that he watches over us until we meet again. May he rest in peace with you, Lord. Amen. Anthony Fletcher, better known as Tony Griffith, age 69, passed away at 6:11 p.m. Thursday, June the 4th, 2020, at St. Louis University Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. Anthony Fletcher Griffith was born on January 18, 1951, the son of Roe Byrne and Carol Lee Arnold Griffith. He was raised in Jasper County, attended Newton Grade School, Western Military Academy in Alton, Illinois from 1965 to 67, and graduated from Newton Community High School with the class of 69. Tony joined the United States Air Force and served from 1970 to 1975 as a helicopter mechanic during Vietnam. Tony was proud to have served our great nation and took pride in being an American. At the age of 23, Tony met a young truck driver at the Ozark Music Festival that would shape his future. After making one trip out west for his new friend, Bob Clout, Tony was instantly hooked on the moving industry. He bought a truck and leased with Beacon Van Lines, and in 1983 founded Hope 4 Trucking, which later became known as Griffith Trucking Broadway Express. From that time, he established Heartland Towing, Heartland Classics in 1987, Heartland Ag Center John Deere dealership, and eventually acquired the Heartland Peterbilt dealership in 1994. Tony was proud to be a Jasper County resident. He was always willing to give back to the community that he loved. Over the last 30 years, he served on the board of directors for People's State Bank in Newton. He was one of the founders of Eagle Country Waterworks, and he helped establish the Jasper County CEO program. Tony was a member of the Newton Masonic Lodge number 216. Outside the community, he was an avid supporter of the Wounded Warrior Project, Vietnam Veterans, ASPCA, NRA, and many other charitable organizations that he held in high regards. Tony's passions include collecting classic cars, guitars, and riding motorcycles. He enjoyed antique shopping, boating, grilling out, and spending time with his fiancée, Diana, and their two dogs, Brody and Annie. They did this on the deck of their home in Branson, is where they enjoyed it the most. He enjoyed time with his family, whether it was canoeing, tubing, Branson shows, train rides, playing hand and foot, a game of catchphrase. Tony always wanted to retire in Branson due to all those summers he spent there with his grandparents. Tony is survived by his fiancée, Diana Nexel, sisters Debbie Griffith, sister Cindy and her husband Mike Goebel, niece Michelle Seaball, nephew Steve Goebel, and his wife Heather. I'm sorry, Michelle, I missed Nick there with you. Great nephew Ryan and Justin Goebel, and Kyle Seaball, and great nieces Lexi Seaball, Taylor Goebel, and Leslie Feelme. Did I do okay? Feelme. Extended family, Sarah Dickens, Lynn Webb, Angie Byers, and Casey Lee and their children, along with many other close friends, relatives, and their, of course, two dogs, Brody and Annie. Tony also leaves behind many of his longtime employees who he actually considered family. Tony was preceded in death by his parents, his wife, his grandparents, Lawrence F. and Cora Arnold, and Jack and Eva Griffith. Death leaves a heartache. Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. Through the beauties of technology, we're sharing tonight's service on Facebook Live, as well as Tony's sister Debbie is joining us on FaceTime. She had sent a letter via email, as some other thoughts we'll share this evening came in via email. So even though distance keeps us apart, hopefully it makes everybody feel like they're here together tonight with us. A letter from Debbie Griffith. An open letter to my brother. Hello, my brother. There are so many things that I want to tell you, things that I'd like to hear. I'd like for you to hear, so let's begin. You were one of the first to greet me when I came into this world. You were only a little over 1 year old, and I'm sure you soon came to feel that I had rained on your parade. One of the first memories I have of you is when you were 5. I would sit on the bar stool at the Dutch door in our kitchen, and I'd wait for you to come home from kindergarten. When you got home, that meant we were gonna play, and we loved to play. Our grandfather, Lawrence Fletcher Arnold, who you were named after, would pick us up almost every day and take us on adventures. To a friend's cabin at Lake Jasper, where we would swing on a wooden hammock, to feed sugar cubes to a friend's horses, or to play on the slide, swings, and merry-go-round at Peterson Park. Afterwards, we would often go for an ice cream cone at the Tasty Freeze. You loved those adventures. You were so much like our grandfather. I remember us playing with all the neighborhood kids, hide and seek, wampus cat, baseball, sledding, and ice and roller skating. A little older, and we were building tree houses, walking the railroad tracks home from our bowling league, and playing in the Saturday morning golf league. You played on the JC baseball team and were the catcher. What good knees we had back then. When we were in high school, we shared a car for a while. It was a blue, shitty F-85. Often, you would leave that car with little gas in it. And guess what? One night, after a basketball game, Cindy and I ended up riding home in the back of a Newton police cruiser. Our car had ran out of gas. Surprise. Speaking of surprises, I bet most people didn't know that you could play by ear almost any song anyone would ask you to play on the piano. Another thing, did you know what a wonderful storyteller you were? Be it an actual story or one that you enhanced, no one could tell a story better than you. Your stories always made me laugh, well, at least crack a smile. Time passed and we went to college. Vietnam happened. You joined the Air Force and became a helicopter mechanic. A few years later, we began our professional careers. You found you liked driving trucks and seeing America firsthand. Soon after, you purchased your first 18-wheeler. After that, there was no stopping you. I didn't see you much, but you always made your way back to Newton. You became the very successful entrepreneur of Griffith Trucking, owner of a Peterbilt dealership, and Heartland Towing. You owned and managed a loading dock and a storage facility, Heartland Classic Cars, and Heartland Agricultural Center, and you were on the board of directors for People's State Bank for many years. I always heard that the firstborn was often the most independent and assertive of all the siblings, and I would have to say you certainly were. I was always proud to call you my brother. In the last 10 years, we got together when I would come back to Illinois, but it was via phone calls and FaceTime that we finally connected. We talked about our gardens, our pets, and many other things. Recently, I showed you my home in Connecticut, which you hadn't seen in 30 years, via FaceTime. I showed you items from our childhood and an artist print of a railroad train that I had purchased for you at an auction in the mid-1980s. That print has hung on my dining room wall since it was purchased, waiting for you to come for a visit and take it home with you. This past March, I told you how scared I was when COVID-19 began taking so many lives in New York City and here in Connecticut, and my fear of people looting. You immediately understood and responded to my fear. By the last weeks of May, we had talked several more times. You had again become the brother I remembered from my youth. One day, I told you I might go to a local hardware store and have them throw a couple bags of mulch in the back of my SUV. Connecticut was in a stay-at-home shutdown at the time. You asked me if it was really worth taking the risk of going out, and you told me to stay home and be safe. I did stay home that day. I have stayed home unless it has been essential. Then I went out, and I have tried to stay safe. The last few times I talked to you, I could tell you were trying to put on an upbeat face for me, but my gut told me that our time together was almost through. I was so happy for you when you were able to go to our beloved home, your beloved home in Branson, if only for a few days. I wish it could have been a longer stay. You were the last of our Arnold, Barton, Lane, and Ivy ancestry, dating back almost 200 years, who've lived in Newton and Jasper County. Know that your ancestors and your family are all proud of you and what you accomplished. Your life was much too short. My beloved brother, I have loved you all of my life, but never so much as in the past few months. You're in my heart forever. I miss you so much. Your loving sister, Debbie. As you entered this evening, back near the register book, there was a flower, a rose, amongst the thorns. And that was from Debbie. It represents Tony's first fleet of trucks, and if you also notice the patch there with the rose as well. So I understand that that's something of significance that he put on many of his fleet, and the rose among the thorns is what that represents. As we go forth this evening, we're going to hear from lifelong friends, community members, and some of his work family. First, I'll start with a letter that was sent by Mike Hogerby. I first met Tony in 1971 at Hill Air Force Base in Utah. Tony came to our shop inside the aircraft hangar asking if he was at the avionics shop for the 1550th Aircrew Training and Test Wing. I told him that he had arrived at the right place. We talked for a while, and Tony told me that he was from Newton, Illinois. I told Tony that I was from St. Louis. We parted as Tony drove off in his 1968 Opel GT. The next morning at work, I saw Tony again. Tech Sergeant Shea told me that I was Tony's trainer. Tony was an apprentice, and I was a journeyman. Tony was easy to train because Tony was a fast learner. We worked together mostly on helicopters and became best friends. Sometime about a year later, now Sergeant Tony, a journeyman, shipped out to Southeast Asia. After the Air Force, I went to visit Tony in Normal, Illinois, where Tony was going to school and living in a second-floor apartment. I climbed the stairway to the living room, and there was Tony's pearl white Norton motorcycle that Tony had bought while in Utah. It was parked in the living room. I was living in the fixer-upper house in New Mexico when Tony and Big Bob stopped for a visit. They were in a Beacons truck. Tony told me that he was going to buy a truck and become a Beacons driver. About 6 months later, Tony showed up in a 1974 double-bunk white Freightliner with a 1693 TA Cat engine with a 2-stick 5 and 4 transmission that he bought from Ron Neese. It wasn't long before Tony convinced me to buy a truck. I bought an old Ford from a retiring Beacons driver, Scotty. I took the truck to the hillside to sign on with Beacons, and they rejected me for lack of experience. I called Tony, and Tony told him that I was rejected, and that Mayflower said that they would sign me on. He said, no, only Beacons. I asked, what's the difference? They're both moving companies. Tony said, because someday I'm going to own Beacons, and I want you to work with me. He asked me to put Virginia LeGros on the phone, and 5 minutes later, I was a Beacons driver. Tony is a legend. He had a big heart, and I'll miss Tony every day. Love, Mike. Now I'll ask for one of Tony's lifelong friends, Les Perkins, to join us and share a few of his memories.
Good evening to y'all. It's an honor to be here. I don't like the reason we're here, but that's what we can do about it. Life goes on. But there's a few things that a lot of you don't know. Maybe you do. Tony worked hard, he played hard, and I fit in both categories with him. I tried to teach him what I knew in the moving business and tried to teach him how to play hard also. We played in a lot of places. From Indianapolis at the racetrack, all the way to Canada fishing trips, into the San Juan Islands. We chartered a big boat up there. We went out in the islands for a week. Tony and I didn't like what the captain was saying about us getting the boat dirty, so we sparred him. We went home for 3 days. Another reason I think we fired him was the first night on the boat, Tony had cooked a meal. It was delicious. He was a good cook, you know. And after we decided to have a drink, and we had Bailey's ice cream, naturally, had plenty of it. So Tony gets the iced tea glass. He pours Bailey in the iced tea glass. And the captain informs him, you can't drink Bailey's like that. That's to be drank one shot at a time. And Tony politely told him, we bought this Bailey, we'll drink it anywhere we want to. So anyway, that was one of the many trips that we had. We had wonderful times. I remember fishing Lake Lodge, Manitoba. We had good food, and Tony got the gal. Can you imagine Beacon's drivers, even though we moved furniture, trying to take Tony with the gal to an airplane? You had to fly in and wait out in the water to load him up. But that was quite a deal. I think there's some people here that remember that, but it was quite a deal. But that wasn't the worst, but on the way home, he was taking that gout medicine, and we had a plane chartered, and we were up about 9,000 feet, and that gout medicine wasn't doing him no favors, so we had to find a place to get out. But anyway, what a wonderful life. I never would have thought I would have been standing here before y'all at this. I thought he would be at mine, making a speech at my funeral. Because I was a little older, you know, and I thought he'd outlive me by a lot of years. And I'm so sorry that this has happened to us. He was a very dear friend, not only to me, but to a lot of people out here. He knew people all over the United States, as y'all know. And he had very close friends. Just want y'all to know we love him. And we thank each one of you for letting me come up here and say a word. And thank you very much. Thank you.
A few words from Roger Garrick. Tony was one of the last of a dying breed of men. They were ethical, honest, generous, loyal, industrious, and above all kind. Blue skies and green lights, Tony. Roger. From Carl Miller, actually Carl, Charlie, and Art. It's not often in our life that you meet people who are trusty, that I would call special. I've been fortunate to be the lucky people who can consider Tony a friend, a special friend. Tony and I met via our businesses about 33 years ago, and there was an instant kinship, which is rare in life. We had our ups and definitely had our downs, and no matter what, we still remained friends. Tony was intelligent, kind, caring, and would give you the shirt off his back if he felt you truly needed it. Tony was also opinionated, passionate, demanding, and he expected excellence because as good as he gave, that's what he expected in return. Often, Tony was a huge pain in my rear end, just as I was his. But you know what? I really love having that pain there, and I'm going to miss him terribly. A long time ago, my father-in-law said to me that when a man dies, the best thing that can ever be said is that he was a good man. Tony was more than a good man. He was more than a good man. And when we lose a good man, it is diminishing in our lives. And all our lives are diminished with Tony's death. I will miss you, Tony. Love, Carl, Charlie Miller, Art, and family. I have words from Peggy Marshall and Jerry Swisher. So sorry to hear of your loss. We had a lot of good memories while we were growing up in the neighborhood. So many kids in the neighborhood were always outside playing. Those were good times. I will keep Debbie, Cindy, and all the family in my thoughts and prayers. Wesley Bullard. Tony and I met at the Air Force Base in 1970. We went through tech school together for 9 months and spent a lot of our weekends in Newton, Illinois. I'm so sorry for your loss. Robert Clout sent a message. I wish to express my condolences in the passing of Tony. I will carry his boisterous demeanor and can-do attitude in my heart till my time comes. We remained friends for over 44 years and he'll be greatly missed by me and others like me. The hell with the rest of them, they don't matter anyway. Alex Cruz posted a message on Facebook. Last night we lost a great man. Tony Griffith was a man who gave me an opportunity to become an owner-operator. After having my CDL for 3 years, when I turned 21, gave me the opportunity to work for him as a company driver. After about a year in, I bought my first truck and became a sub for Broadway Express. A couple of years later, I bought a brand new Peterbilt from Tony's dealership, and again, I put it to work with Broadway. Tony was a man that took care of all his drivers, owner-operators, and his employees through all of his companies. Tony gave me the opportunity to run for him through all 48 states and Canada. He's the one who guided me through my first 5 years of owner-operatorship out of Effingham, and he will be missed. That's from Alex. Joe Fagan says, Tony is one of my favorite jobs was running your body shop for 6.5 years. Tony Peacher says, Tony Griffith was one of the greatest people I've ever met in my life. He taught me how to be an entrepreneur and really gave me the savvy street business knowledge that I use to this day. If it wasn't for his influence, I would not have become as successful as I am today. Over 30 years ago, this man gave me a job polishing up his Corvette he kept in a storage building across from his office. He taught me about detailing a car and working hard and not giving up. I will remember you forever, Tony. I love you, brother, and may you walk in the streets of the gold heaven and enjoy the eternity of Christ. Bruce Henning said, Tony was the best man I ever worked for. He was a man amongst men and one that was easy to talk to when he was available. I started driving for Tony in 1990 and would still be if my health would allowed. I always looked up to Tony as I admired his business sense. As many others, I will miss him dearly. Then neighbors. Tony, from Teresa Zuber. I enjoyed working with Tony through the years at the bank, but he was also my dad's neighbor. He will be missed. Prayers and sympathy to those who loved him. Amy Tarr sent a message. Oh, Tony, you're one of my favorite CEO speakers. The tours and the tour of the year. Our students always left knowing that to fail is never to have dreamed, never to innovate, and they learned to never be afraid to be the first to try something new in business. You are an inspiration, and your presence in this community will be missed. I'll now read the words that couldn't personally be spoken by Tony's good friend, Richard Stoddard. Diana and the Griffith family, I'm sorry for your loss. Peace and love to you all. Lastly, I would like to say, Tony, I love you. For half of my life, you have been a mentor to me, a boss, a friend, a fellow truck driver, a true inspiration. Always there for me no matter what, and I appreciate that. You are and always will be a huge part of my family and my life, and we all love and miss you. I'll miss your beautiful, wonderful, sometimes vicious, Terribly. That I should have rewrote that. Terribly. I can't read your writing. Your vicious, terribly, and terribly enjoy things you would say. I'll miss the everyday discussions and operations and the agreeing and the disagreeing. I'll miss your stories of the road when you were a driver. All of the insightful and interesting as you all could imagine. But most of all, I'll miss you. As we heard before, Tony was a kind, caring, intelligent, ethical, honest, generous, loyal, industrious, a legend. a industry giant. I've known a lot of good men in my life. I still know a lot of good men in my life. But when you talk about the great men, that list is short. But Tony Griffith, you're on that list. Every day I will miss you, and I will never forget you. Rest in peace, sir. Love, Richard. Diana has a few words that she's going to try to share with us this evening. And if you're unable to, I'm right here for you. I can read your writing.
I'm glad somebody
Hold on a second,
can.
I have something else for you, just in case you need it.
Oh, Cleveland. Tony and I enjoyed 7 years together. From that first motorcycle ride when he was going to capture me, to the will you marry me, to the let's retire in Branson, we made more memories than most do in 20 years. Tony had a way with words. From the love notes he left me to find, to the extra poems written in a Hallmark card, he always professed his love for me and our life together. We were truly happy. Tony and I took a trip out west last summer on Route 66. He was so excited to be able to show me the many places he and his trucking buddies had traveled. Some places were still there, some dilapidated, and some gone completely. I had to look those up on the internet. I heard the wild tales of adventure, mishaps, hairpin curves, and getting his name in the big Texan book for eating the 72-ounce steak. Family time was important to me, so it was important to Tony. We, my 4 daughters and 12 grandchildren, along with Tony's family, managed to get Tony to go rafting, kayaking, tubing, zip lining, and go-kart racing. We even got him to play catchphrase, of which he took forever to say. Remember back when, so if you were on Tony's team, you were sure to win. If you were on the other team, you were sure to lose. How do I say goodbye to the man I have loved with my whole heart for the past 7 years? I don't. 1 second. I still say, good morning, my prince, and at night, I love you so much. I still enjoy coffee on the deck with visions of him fussing with his cherry tomato plants. His spirit is now and will always be guiding me and keeping me safe. So I will not say goodbye. I will only say, someday we'll be together again. I love you, my prince. You are forever in my heart. I didn't even have to clean this.
I'd given a little coaching that said, I'm pretty sure Tony would tell you to suck it up because you can do hard things.
He would have talked longer.
Longer? One other quote that came about when we were talking about Tony was, don't worry about the horse, just load the wagon. I'm truly sorry for your loss. I want you to know that Tony will always be in our hearts. I want to thank everyone for coming here today, those who joined us virtually, as we've celebrated a life well lived, but cut entirely way too short. Tony will always remember for his stories, and we could, if he would have been here, we could have went on and on and on with stories. But those stories will be shared for years. As we leave this evening, let one of his favorite quotes ring in your ear: go big or go home. As we dismiss this evening, we're going to ask that you join the family on the East Lawn for military honors. And at this time, we'll give everyone an opportunity to come up past the family, pay your final respects, and then join us out there, like I said, on the East Lawn for our military honors. Is that okay? Oh, okay. Someone else would like to speak here as we prepare to go out this evening. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't really on the agenda, but I'm Charlie Cook. I'm his 29-year insurance agent. I met Tony in 1991 when I was first selling truck insurance. And he was quite a force to deal with. When I first met him, you could just tell he was like some force of nature. And it wasn't just like mentally in that, but I gave him a pen, like, you know, you always, back in the old days, used to hand out stuff. Gave him a pen, and he's pulling on it like he thinks it's a pull apart one. And he's pulling, he's like, what's wrong with this pen? And he's pulling on it, and I'm starting to say, it's a screw on, and he pulls it apart without unscrewing it. It was like, he's a force of nature, not just mentally, but actually physically. And I actually tried to get like the next 50 guys I ran into that were strong to open it. Not a single person could pull it apart without unscrewing it. So he was a force of nature, mentally and physically. And I'm just, really didn't plan on this, but I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for my loss. I really love the guy. I mean, he was my longest term fleet customer, but he was a good friend, and I enjoyed dealing with him so much. Like almost all the time I enjoyed dealing with him. You know, so I'm like, I'm taking care of his truck insurance, and every once in a while, he had a really good drivers and good equipment, and he had good losses. He had honestly the cheapest rates I've ever seen in my life for a fleet, because he was so good at one time. But every once in a while, you know, a truck would wreck, and there's nothing you're gonna do about that. And so the first time, we've been getting along great for years. The first time we wrecked a truck, and he had it insured for like, say, $50,000. And they offered him 40, and he's like, I insured it for $50,000. I want my $50,000. He's going off on a rampage. You know how he can be, right? I mean, love the guy, but he wanted stuff his way, right? Did he not want business to turn out his way? All right. So I'm trying to explain to him that he set a limit of 50,000, and every insurance company in the world, you know, has experts give their opinion on it about how it is, and then they get like an average of those opinions, and that's what they offer you. And he thinks about it for a minute, and he goes, okay, so this is a truck I bought new, this is a truck I've serviced entirely, and I'm a Peterbilt dealer. Who in the world is a better expert than me? And I go, Tony, you're right, I'm gonna get you some more money. I had to share it. I love the guy, and we're all gonna miss him. Thanks for letting me interrupt you.